Hello, and welcome to the Logistics Management Podcast. My name is Jeff Berman. I'm Group News Editor for Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group. Today, it's a real pleasure to welcome back to the podcast once again Ian Jefferies. Ian serves as President and CEO of the Washington, D.C. based Association of American Railroads. He started his role at in leading the AAR back in January of 2019. And prior to that, he served as the Senior Vice President of AAR's Government Affairs, overseeing the development, promotion, and implementation of legislative priorities for the AAR. And prior to joining the AAR, Ian served as a senior policy advisor to the chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation from 2009 to 2013. Ian, welcome back to the podcast once again.
Hey Jeff, thanks for having me. Good to be on again. I feel like I might be creeping up on record number of appearances.
Yeah, by my count, we're at least five or six. So
Hi,
I guess we're doing something right here. And thank you for returning once again.
of
Uh,
course.
yeah, absolutely. So we got a lot to cover in a fairly short window here, Ian. So we'll just hop right in here. Um, at the current time, in Washington is moving on with its next surface transportation bill. I'd be curious to hear about, from your perspective, why does that timing matter? And specifically, what's at stake for freight rail in this debate?
Sure thing. And you're exactly right. It's that time of that time on the calendar. The last bill is a 5-year bill, and it'll be expiring next September. So we've got about a year before that expires. But as you and most of our listeners probably know, things if there's one thing for sure, things take longer than expected up on Capitol Hill. Case in point, kind of what we're seeing lately on spending and appropriations. But so work is beginning in earnest, even though we've got about a year, just because a surface transportation reauthorization it's a multi-pronged piece of legislation. In the House, primarily it's the House Transportation Committee, and then of course the Ways and Means Committee looking for pay-fors, and then a little bit on some other committee activity. Over in the Senate, it's really four core committees. So you've got the Environment and Public Works Committee, which is focused on the highway piece. You've got the Banking Committee focused on the transit piece. And then you've got the Commerce Committee focused on all of the kind of vehicle and safety pieces. And then, of course, you have Senate Finance Committee. So there's a whole lot of moving parts and pieces of the puzzle that need to put together and be put together. And especially in the House, Chairman Sam Graves, chair of the House Transportation Committee, has been
Yep.
very clear from the outset that he wants to put a bill together this fall and wants to get it reported out of committee this fall to really kind of lay down the marker, I think, in his view, to be kind of the standard for what a bill will look like, at least from the House position. Get that out early, and then let the others, follow suit. Chair Shelley Moore Capito, chair of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, has made clear her staff is going to be working this fall. She's acknowledged publicly that it's going to be a big lift to try to get their bills really moved this fall, but also I think recognizing that there's a lot of time next year, and but no time like the present to get going. And so for rail, I'm sure we'll get into kind of the core things we're looking to achieve or to work on. But it's all about a healthy integrated supply chain, healthy integrated transportation system. We rely on our partners. Our partners rely on us. Everything needs to work, and that means everything needs to be funded appropriately. And of course, we're almost entirely privately owned and maintained. But our public infrastructure partners rely on substantial public funding, and it's important for the federal government to play its very critical role in making sure that the folks get the dollars they need.
Sure, absolutely. From a political landscape perspective, Ian, the White House recently nominated Richard Kloster and renominated Michelle Schultz to the STB as board members. With that said, how do you sort of see regulatory priorities shifting over the near term?
Sure. So over kind of at the administrative side, and specifically since you asked the Surface Transportation Board. The chair, Chairman Patrick Fuchs, has been very active since day one. I think he came in and saw a lot of opportunity to streamline the organization, to set up process improvement, get decisions made more quickly, work through proceedings more quickly, make sure they're meeting statutory timelines on all the different things that the board engages in. I think he deserves a lot of credit for doing an excellent job there. You mentioned that Michelle Schultz is being renominated. Of course, she's currently at the board, where we sit with currently a three-person board.
Yes.
And of course, Richard Kloster is a new nominee. So Michelle, she still has time to serve on her current term, plus a carryover year. I believe her term might expire the end of this year, and then she gets another carryover year. And so we're keeping an eye on that. And of course, Richard Kloster is, like I mentioned, a new nominee. And the White House actually just formally announced both of those actions here in the very recent days. And so now, of course, their nominations will go to the Senate Commerce Committee for consideration and processing as appropriate. I'm not sure folks expect that to be a lightning quick process. As we sit here today, the government is still shut down, and Congress is engaged on looking for the best path forward there. So I think all other activities take a back seat to that effort, unless and until that's solved. And so we'll be productive and actively engaged in those two nominations. I think we've seen Member Schultz is a very productive member, very strong member, working in partnership with the chair. And I would anticipate Richard Kloster would follow suit in that as well. So the board is working well and doing a lot of good work right now, and we want to make sure that remains the case regardless of the composition.
No, absolutely. With the House and Senate currently drafting bills in, what would you view as sort of freight rail's top ask of Congress within the respective legislation?
Sure. So we've got kind of the specific, parochial rail issues we're going to be focused on, but then broader issues, multi-stakeholder issues. So, we think it's absolutely critical. I mentioned the funding side, that the Highway Trust Fund, which is the primary funding vehicle for the nation's highway systems, be really pulled back into some sort of sustainable model. When you're in a situation when you've literally seen hundreds of billions of dollars get transferred out of the general trust fund, or excuse me, the general fund, in order to support current level spending in the highway trust fund, that's frankly not sustainable, and I don't think any stakeholders want to see that be the case. And so we've really got to create a model, get back to the trust fund supporting itself. Historically, that was done, as you know, by the gas tax, but
Yes.
the gas tax hasn't been increased since 1993. And the demands on the trust fund have only continued to expand. And so there's a lot of folks, a lot of stakeholders around town working on various ideas. But for our purposes, we really need to get back to that user pays model. So those who are using the infrastructure should be paying for that infrastructure, and those who are, and it should be adjusted based on size and weight, and all users should be included in our view. But we're ready, willing, and able to work with anybody who has an equitable solution that they've developed, and we'll lean into that. But the core for us is a self-sustaining, truly equitable user pays solution. So that's going to be a big ticket item. Other issues we're focused on, permitting. There's a very broad multi-stakeholder push for permitting reform. Whether it's public dollars or private dollars put into infrastructure projects, we spend way too long going through arduous reviews that end up in some sort of nightmarish feedback loop, and suddenly you're 10 years down the road still trying to get your project approved. And all that does is delay investment, it increases costs, and reduces available spending that could be used on other projects. And so nobody's trying to eliminate processes per se, but I think just setting some reasonable timelines, setting up one lead agency in the federal government, concurrent reviews, just things like that to provide certainty for those who are looking to invest into projects, so that we can get back to building things in this country under a reasonable amount of time. And like I mentioned, that's not only rail, the highway users, the energy companies, the mining companies, the electric companies, every industry out there involved in infrastructure is pushing for this. And I'm really confident we can get some good things done. For rail specific, for us, we're big fans of working with our federal partners to improve grade crossing safety. So whether that's working to continue what was a very popular grade crossing elimination grant program for our federal, or excuse me, our public partners to tap into to eliminate those highest impact grade crossings, or just making sure we've got the most up-to-date safety devices at grade crossings to ensure that the motoring public doesn't put itself in a risky position. We see that far too often, folks trying to beat trains, things like that, and
Sure.
that's dangerous behavior, and it all far too often ends in tragedy. So we're going to be focused on improving safety around grade crossings, and then for us, on the operational side, we've really got to be able to make some progress on deploying new technologies, innovating, and that can really be done by setting up structured pilot programs for kind of proving grounds for new technologies that allow you to build out the data to demonstrate data-driven safety improvements. And at the end of the day, where we'd like to get is a regulatory regime that is really outcomes based versus inputs based. So instead of saying, oh, this needs to be inspected, at this frequency, let's focus on the outcome we're seeking. What's the safety outcome? And if I can come up with new and different ways to meet or exceed that outcome, I should be encouraged to do so. That also keeps you from locking in one current way of doing things, whether it's manually or even using today's technology, because nobody knows what's going to be on the horizon. Nobody knows what folks are going to develop tomorrow. And so we don't want to lock ourselves into the current way of doing things. We want to be thinking about outcomes and continuous safety improvement. And so how can we work with legislators and policymakers to help create a regulatory regime that helps us down that path? And that's a complex issue, but something we're going to be working with folks on to try to make a little progress on.
All right, great. So the state of Illinois recently announced a record 50.6 billion multimodal infrastructure program. Are there any specific lessons in that federal lawmakers should take from these types of state level investments?
Well, I think it just demonstrates that states are willing to put skin in the game and step up from their end to make necessary infrastructure investments. So if you look at the infrastructure grades of public infrastructure around this country, they're not great. You wouldn't be happy taking that report card home to your parents.
Right, right.
And so to me, it is very encouraging to see states like Illinois and others who are willing to put their dollars up, and their resources out of their treasury up, to either match with the private industry or match with federal dollars, to get projects done. And for our purposes, as we've talked about before, and folks know, we're really proud of the CREATE program in Chicago. It is kind of the model public-private partnership between railroads, the city, the state, the feds, and we've gotten massive projects done with everybody stepping up, putting skin in the game. But that doesn't have to be unique to just one state. Things along those lines can be done around the country, and that's just one good example.
Okay, terrific. And so how does freight rail make the case for private investment leverage, in terms of showing that railroads obviously already fund their networks in comparison to other modes that seek taxpayer support?
Absolutely. So that's something we're most proud of, and scream from the rooftops, and I'd say until I'm blue in the face that we make investments so taxpayers don't have to. We're very proud of that. We certainly work with federal partners to leverage appropriate grant programs, but by and large, 95+% of the dollars going into our network are private revenues, and that's to the tune of nearly $25 billion a year every year. And so we're pleased that we don't need to go to Capitol Hill to ask for funding. And we think that frankly helps our value proposition, because we don't operate or because we do operate on private infrastructure. We think we should be able to do more on the technology front. We think we should be operating across an equitable playing field. That kind of gets back to the highway trust fund. We pay for our own infrastructure. Users of other infrastructure, be it public or not, should be fully paying for the infrastructure they use. It's kind of a competitive issue, and I give credit to those who are working to make that happen, certainly. Um, but I do think it really adds to our value proposition and allows us to be more effective in some of the arguments on tangential issues that we're making up on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, no question about it. And shifting back over to the STB for a moment, Ian, former STB Commissioner Robert Primus is suing over his recent dismissal, framing it as an independence issue. And with that as sort of a backdrop, how important is STB independence for maintaining stability and also confidence in the freight rail network?
Sure, and of course, I certainly can't comment on the ins and outs of that litigation. The administration has determined they rightfully removed the board member, and that'll play out in court. But at the end of the day, I do think it's important that the STB maintains its level of independence, and I think it very much is, and has, and will be. And this chairman has made that very clear. And at the end of the day, the structure of the STB and its regulatory process, a balanced regulatory approach that lets markets work, but also provides a backstop should a customer be concerned about, for example, a rate it might be charged. And it's worked well. It's allowed railroads to continue to provide very competitive prices at the same time earning the revenues we need to invest back into our networks to meet today's demand, but also prepare for tomorrow's demand. And that's the way it should work, frankly, that you have a day-to-day light touch regulator, but they have the tools necessary to engage when necessary. And so I'm confident. Not concerned at all about a lack of independence at the STB and how it makes decisions and how the chairman operates.
Okay, understood. And so with some signs of supply chain pressures easing at a time when volume gains do remain modest, what do you think the rail sector really needs from policymakers to maintain momentum on things like efficiency and also service reliability?
Sure. So much of it is based in innovation and technology. We next year, believe it or not, while the country celebrates its 250th anniversary, we'll be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the birth of the rail system. And our code of federal regulations reflects that, for better or worse. We're operating under regulations that were written, over 50 years ago, and I know it won't shock you to find out that we've advanced the ways we can do things since then, since 1970. Yet we're still required to conduct, for example, various types of inspections and detections based on what we were able to do in 1970. That is not keeping up with the pace of innovation by any stretch of the imagination. Like
Right.
every industry, we've developed new, better, more effective, more efficient ways to do things that result in a higher safety outcome that also allow us to have more capacity within the existing infrastructure we operate. And so that all falls into, again, safety and service, increasing visibility for our customers, creating much more predictable, high levels of on-time service for premium traffic. At the end of the day, intermodal traffic is a huge piece of pie that we need to continue to work to get more pieces of for our industry. And that relies on very timely, near perfect service. And so all the things we're doing today across the board, be it digitally or with real hard assets to provide a better service product, provide better information for customers, increase safety, are going to pay benefits down that path.
Oh, no doubt. Um, as Union Pacific CEO Jim Vena recently said that the economy is still resilient, but cracks are showing in housing and consumer demand. From where you sit in, how healthy do you think the freight economy is? And as a follow-up, what role does rail play in sustaining that resilience?
Sure. So, I think it's been pretty well documented that across the entire freight ecosystem, we've been in a bit of a freight recession here over the past few years. When I look at rail traffic, We're actually up year over year. Total traffic across the board is up just over 3.5%. Intermodal's up nearly 7%. Carloads are up. There's ups and downs. Chemicals have been up okay, but certainly there are other areas that are lagging, as Jim pointed out. And so, as what we are very much a harbinger of the economy, a kind of a leading indicator of the economy. Um, I will just say this: that I think folks see value in perhaps where interest rates are, where interest rates are going to stimulate industrial investment. But the fact of the matter is, railroads are built to be resilient, to adjust to changing economic trends, and to be ready to serve our customers with the traffic they have, and that's going to be ups and downs and all arounds. But I think working closely with our customers in order to get a sense of what they see coming down the pike and what their expectations are allows us to better prepare to make sure we're providing the best service we can for all the traffic that we can handle. And of course, we always want more traffic, but if the economy can keep chugging along here, and we can see some additional economic growth, I think railroads would be very well positioned to take advantage of that.
All right, that's encouraging. From a labor perspective, Ian, labor shortages continue to affect trucking. It's been well documented. How does rail position itself as part of the solution to supply chain workforce challenges?
Sure thing. And that's a complex issue, right? I think back in 2021, coming out of the depths of the pandemic, when we saw such a strong snapback of traffic, railroads got caught short and found themselves a bit of a dearth of available employees in certain situations. And I think I've applied a lot of lessons learned to ensure that we have a kind of a buffer in our workforce to be able to take on maybe unanticipated traffic volumes. But I think we need to reflect on kind of the difference in our industry as well. We are a fully unionized industry via collective bargaining, and unlike what we saw a few years ago, back in 2022, when we had a pretty rough round of negotiations with our employees, this time around, we're making real progress, and I'm very pleased with that. The latest bargaining round just started last November, and a majority of our contracts are either fully ratified or tentatively agreed to across the board with our employees. And what does that mean? That means for the next 5 years, our employees know what their annual pay raise is going to be. They know what their best in class healthcare is going to cost. They know what their time off is going to look like. And so that creates a lot of certainty for them. And frankly, I think creates a higher level of morale in the workforce, and allows us, as we need to attract employees to our industry without all of the challenges that we faced via bargaining last time around. So I'm really pleased about that. And I think that's why right now, average tenure in our industry is almost 13 years, and that's 3 to 4 times longer than most of our peer industries. So folks are sticking around, and we ask a lot of them, and they give a lot to the industry. But we also try to make sure that they're appropriately compensated, and we provide the best opportunities we can. So I would say our employee situation and our workforce situation is strong right now, and we've applied lessons learned from tough times in the past.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that 13 years, I guess I wasn't aware of that. That's a pretty impressive statistic to say the least. Shifting over to innovation, safety, and environmental issues, in what policies can accelerate the adoption of safety technologies such as automated inspection, digital platforms, and also grade crossing innovations too?
So from a policy perspective, I think it's maybe three different things. One, robust pilot slash waiver programs over at the DOT that are very much objectively established, and using objective criteria to evaluate new technologies, data-driven decision making. Like I said, providing an opportunity deploy new technologies or innovations, new ways of doing things to meet a current requirement, providing the proving ground to allow for adequate testing, to develop an objective data set to determine whether or not the new way of doing things results in an equal or better safety outcome. And if the data shows that it does, there should be a very predictable process that allows you to weave the new way into meeting the existing regulatory requirements. So that's first. Second, I would say we need mode neutral technology policy. In other words, we certainly don't disparage other technology, or excuse me, other transportation modes from being able to innovate and automate. But we also want to be allowed to do the same. So we think it is very prudent to set a standard of technology policy and innovation policy that applies to all modes equally, so that you don't inadvertently end up picking winners and losers amongst industries, because that's not appropriate. At the end of the day, we should all be able to move forward and advance safety and efficiency on equal playing ground. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, but outcomes-based regulation. Tell me what the result you want is, and let me figure out the best way to get there. And if I'm hitting or exceeding that result, then I should be able to adjust how I do things on my end. And again, that's outcomes-based regulation, and something that we think makes a lot of sense. So those three buckets, I think, could do a lot.
Yeah, it definitely seems so. We talked about intermodal before, and obviously it has strong growth potential, but at the same time, it also faces some inhibitors like bottlenecks and also competition from advanced trucking technologies. That said, what should government do to help sort of unlock that growth?
Well, again, it goes back to innovation and technology, a light touch, and allowing data to drive decisions. But I also think, and I'll kind of maybe give you a little bit of an unexpected response here, is really establishing some strong preemption policies, specifically coming out of the Surface Transportation Board. Why is that? Because so often we look to invest in new projects or expand facilities, or our customers do, and we get caught up in state bureaucratic malaise or state reviews, and end up in this endless cycle of review. And when the feds act on interstate rail issues, it preempts state activities. And so if the Surface Transportation Board, who has very much publicly shown an interest in asserting its preemption authority, if the Surface Transportation Board pushes out that strong message, it will really enable and encourage investment in areas where we may have been stymied in the past. And a lot of the investment railroads are making and looking to make is around intermodal. So new intermodal facilities, partnerships, again, with our customers. And so I think that can really help drive investment that will allow us to further create better service products, working, frankly, with our trucking partners to continue to grow the amount of traffic that's moving across the rail via intermodal.
Okay, absolutely. And from a climate perspective, railroads are obviously a key climate solution, but locomotive emissions remain under scrutiny. So how do you sort of balance advancing sustainability coupled with those regulatory headwinds?
Yeah, so I mean, here's the deal. You want to reduce emissions today, get stuff on the rails, right? Because railroads emit, one quarter of the emissions that over the highway freight does. That doesn't mean we're resting on our laurels. We're continuing to drive down our emissions. Why? One, it's the right thing to do. And two, diesel remains one of the largest expenses in the industry. So reduction in diesel just makes good business sense for us as well. And so we're working towards a furthering to reduce our emissions and overall environmental impact every day. Where we run into challenges, though, is if policymakers at the federal level or at the state level mandate milestones or technologies that frankly are not achievable or don't exist. Let's let a good thing keep going here and allow us to continue to innovate and determine the best way to move forward, whether that's incorporating battery electric, incorporating additional use of biofuels or other technologies out there to further reduce our impact, because it's not only good for the environment, it's good for business.
Yeah, no, well said. Just two more quick ones before we wrap here, Ian. If you had a single message for lawmakers that are writing the next transportation bill, what would that message be?
Man, only one message. That's a tough one. You know what? I think it's let's create across the board. Let's create a level playing field for all modes that allows for innovation and incentivizes investment back into our transportation network to advance safety and service.
Okay, that's great. And looking ahead, say 5 years out, what do you view as the single biggest opportunity and also the single biggest risk within freight rail?
Well, I would say the biggest opportunity is, again, really the opportunity to deploy at scale a lot of the technologies we've developed to advance safety, improve service for our customers. And that also might be the biggest risk if we're continually hamstrung from being able to innovate and advance. It's going to create a less competitive railroad and not allow us to make the advances we need to make, not only from the business side, but also for society's benefit. And so I'm confident we're going to get there. Nothing ever moves as fast as you want it to, but we're going to keep pressing to move the ball forward and make sure that the railroad of tomorrow is where it needs to be.
That's great. It's a great place to finish on, Ian. On behalf of Logistics Management Magazine and also the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, I'd like to once again say thanks for joining us today for what I think is the sixth time you've been on our podcast. I'll have to clarify that, but either way, thanks for spending some time with us once again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Six times a charm, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, you and Michael Jordan, I guess.
Ah,
Six rings.
that's the only thing we're going to be compared on, so I'll take it.
Um, and for those of you in the audience, you can check Ian out on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/IAN dash Jefferies backslash, and that's Jefferies. The AAR also has a presence on Twitter as well, just simply at AAR_freight rail. You can also check out logistics management on Twitter, simply at logisticsmgmt. And also, please feel free to go ahead and look for our podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just look for the Logistics Management Podcast. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.